Let's talk about tailoring your CV. Now, this tends to wind up a lot of people, especially when they ask the question of me in, for example, TikTok Live and say, should I tailor my CV for every job I apply for? And I then say yes, and then the individual themselves gets very, very annoyed because that's a lot of work. And, I'm having to apply for 5 a day or something. And, that's just really annoying. Yes. Yes, it is. Can you use AI? Yeah. There's a few systems out there that claim to do this. I've had a look at them. I've not found them very good. So let me explain what we mean by tailoring. So let's assume there are a couple of jobs, right? There's one data analyst role, and it's in the education sector. Okay. Then there's another one, data analyst role, and it's in the technology sector. Okay. And let's assume you did computer science and you have some experience helping out in the education sector, right, at your university. And then the rest of your experience is in the technology sector. Okay. And this is how and why we want to be adjusting CVs, because it gives you the ability to customize how amazing you are to the role. So the job spec might say, we're looking for a data analyst with a great background in technology, blah, blah, blah. But also this is for an education client. And so any education experience would be very helpful. You often see that kind of thing in the CV, in the job spec. So what would you do? Well, let's presume you've got a CV that's quite standard technology data analyst, okay? Well, what would you do? Well, you might want to make sure that you highlight in your CV, you've got your first role, your second role, and the third role was you at university. And you may have dropped that because it wasn't that relevant. Well, bring it back in again, right? Okay, because now this job spec is looking for someone with education experience as well, right? So this is an example of you tailoring. Okay, so you've got your standard stuff, and then you can put in your section. You can bring it back from another version of the CV, another file, right? So you have multiple files here, right? And you can put in your education experience, teaching or suggesting stuff with data analytics. You might then adjust your intro, your 1 or 2 line intro, to say with experience in education, brackets, right? Okay, so that when someone's bringing up your CV on screen, they go, interesting. So you can see them they'll be scanning down and going, okay, technical. Here's the education. Interesting, right? Let's talk to this guy. So now, often you'll see it where someone says, we're looking for someone with experience in X or Y. Now let's take another example. An example where we're looking for a data analyst, but we want someone who's got lots of experience using technology and working in teams. Okay, and we specifically said it's using this tech, Tableau, something, and it's working in teams or in projects. Now your existing CV might mention one aspect of that. It will actually, in this particular job, they've said, we're looking for people who've used this system, and you have used it, great. And we're looking for people who've worked in teams. So what we mean is that if we put that in the job spec and it's quite a priority there, we're probably caring about that. So now you bring up your CV and you start editing. Okay, you start saying, okay, well, wait a minute. I've got one on teamwork here, but let me just let me customize this bullet point and that one. Let me add in team building here. Let me add in with other colleagues. Let me just make sure that I'm infusing the existing bullet points, but from a perspective of team working in teams. And then the piece of software. That might be right down the bottom of your CV. You might not have included it because it wasn't relevant in other roles. But now, big time, now it's relevant, okay? So that's where you might have one of the bullet points, right? One of your bold bullet points might be Tableau or whatever they specified, right? And then you explain what you were doing with that. And then you might also, in some of the other bullet points where you're talking about reporting or something, you then stick in using Tableau or, created this using Tableau, right? So this is an example of customizing for the job spec. Now, every single time you go file, save as, or actually good practice, before you start customizing a CV, duplicate it. Take a copy, stick it in a different folder, name the folders by date order, right? So it's presented really nicely. Date and then job or company name, just so you can remember. Now, if you keep doing this on a regular basis, you build up a really good library. of CVs. You can go, oh yeah, where was the data analyst one in education? There it is. Double click. How is that looking? Actually, I've got better bullet points that I made on this one, so bring them in, bring them in. This is where you're having a really simple standard is really important, so it's not crazy, difficult formatting. You just cut and paste, cut and paste. And then you can make sure that very quickly you can see a job and you can respond to it really, really effectively. You can say, yeah, I like that one. Okay. I'll just add in some bits here, bits there. At no point are we saying be creative. No. It's just when we say customizing or tailoring your CV to a role, what we mean is you do so much in a role. Deciding what bullet points to put on your CV, as we have discussed, is quite a challenge. And in most cases, we're having to summarize. We can't do the whole thing, right? Describing what you do in a role comprehensively will take pages and pages and pages, hundreds of pages. Okay, so when we say tailor, some people think, oh, tailoring, that sounds like it's cheating. No, that's not what we're talking about. It's about saying, look, generally speaking, you have mentioned teamwork once in your CV. Fine, right, good, right, great. But actually, this one is placing a very high, they're saying we want people, right? The job spec is really going to town and saying we want people who have worked in teams, for example. Then maybe with your bullet points, you start to tailor them, right? To evidence how you were doing that thing in a team, this thing in a team, that thing in a team. Now, you're not making stuff up because you did that in a team. It's just you summarized it like that, okay? Now, that doesn't mean, I wouldn't recommend just going, okay, that's it, gold master. That's my CV. It's never changing. That's it. Let's go. And you just say, okay, let me submit it. Send. In some cases, if they haven't got that many candidates, and if your CV is brilliantly written, you might get a phone call. In other cases, if it's not relevant and you didn't tailor it, you might not get a phone call. Who knows? It's difficult to know, but this is a methodology for tailoring. Okay, so have a folder for all of your CVs. Have your, if you like, a standard one by all means, right? But then every time you see another job, make a duplicate folder. Double click in the CV, make any amends if you want to make amends, right? If you think is appropriate to bring out and highlight some of the experience that you haven't gone in depth on for obvious reasons, right? When you're writing it, go in depth, save, send. Now you're building a library, okay? And as you're going and applying, yes, it can be really painful when you start. Getting that first version, that first draft out the door is really annoying. But once you've got it, then you can begin to really improve it. Now, what I see is across, after you've done quite a few of these, you start to get, this is the CV, this is the master one, right? The most recent one. Because very quickly, as you're tailoring and making it better and evolving these bullet points, the older ones from months ago, even though they were good then, they tend to date very quickly, and this is the one that you want to be working on, and that's the one you'll make changes to. Or often you'll get a situation whereby the job spec says something unexpected, and you think, okay, which one of my 5 CVs, which one of my 25 versions am I going to start with? I'll start with this one, okay, and I'll bring in that bullet point, that one from my other versions, because they want this thing. File, save, send. So there's an approach to tailoring.